There are only two lasting bequests we can hope to give our children. One of these is roots, the other, wings. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents. Carl Jung. Welcome to Beneath the Surface, the space where we dive deep into the heart of what it means to live fully, authentically, and a more purposeful life. I'm Sean DeLaney, and today we're diving into what I want to pass on to my kids. As always, I'm not trying to tell a story, but what I'm trying to do is share what I found to be incredibly important, and specifically what I try to focus on as a parent. Now I'm going to throw a lot of ideas at you because I'm hoping that one of these ideas, one of these concepts might connect with you, connect a little deeper. And because of that, it might radically shift how you approach your life. And I believe parents putting a very intentional focus on how we want to show up in the world for our kids is more important now than ever. And I'm going to read you off a few statistics that really inspired this episode. So teens who use social media over 5 hours a day have a 66% higher risk of engaging in suicidal behavior. Nearly 2 in 5 U.S. high schoolers, that's 40%, report persistent sadness, hopelessness in 2023. We need to change things. And it is our responsibility as parents, and I get choked up reading those statistics because I'm a parent of 4. I have 2 boys and I have 2 girls, and I feel a moral obligation to try to help my kids better navigate the world we're in right now. So let's get right into this. And if you're like me and a majority of the parents that I know, we can just get caught in the day-to-day drama of our overscheduled lives and often miss this bigger picture. And so I find it incredibly invaluable to slow down, to step back and reflect on what I'm actually working towards as a parent. What is the culture we're trying to actually create within our family? And so what I want to do is get those juices, those creative juices stirring for you and start thinking about, how do I want to show up in this world? What type of parent do I want to be? What are the lessons I'm hoping my kids are going to discover on their own and then be able to live out in their own lives? And a critical reason I said that I want my kids to discover instead of me saying I want to teach them, because I found in my own life, the lessons that seem to stay with me the longest, I had to learn myself. I might have heard the insight from someone else, or I heard it mentioned, or I might have read it in a book. But I'm sure you felt this too. Until you live it, until you had to slog through it on your own, it's not yours. That's what wisdom is. Wisdom can only come from a lived experience, unlike knowledge, which can be passed down and can be read in books. Now, I don't think we can force the deepest lessons onto our kids. But what we can do is we can stay true to certain values, to certain ideas, to certain concepts that we live into again and again, and they slowly start to pick these up. So I actually have a project I've been working on for years. I call it a project. It'll be a book someday, just shared with my family. And it's essentially an encapsulation I'm keeping for my kids. And what I've done is I am compiling, and this has been going on for years now, what I consider the greatest insights, the greatest quotes, the best ideas that I've come across. It's the best encapsulation of what I think is real important stuff. And I even have a section in it where I've thought of some really thought-provoking questions that I answer for my kids. So it might even be around some of the more challenging moments of my life. And I just describe to them how I navigated it, how I thought about it. It's much less about what I did and much more about how I handled it and what was going through my head and how I think about it now. So this document, I really cherish. It really is what I probably say is like my most cherished possession. I tell my wife, if I die, go to this document. It's basically the central hub of the most important ideas I've ever come across for what I think a meaningful life is. And I hope that inspires you to say, you know what? Maybe I start doing something similar. And it doesn't have to be some big burdensome document the way I'm articulating it right now. It really just started as a single one-pager, as my life philosophy, the principles I wanted to live by. It was just one page. And it's grown from there. And I started to find wisdom and insights everywhere, and I couldn't help but compile these. So maybe you try that. Maybe you start writing out what your philosophy is on parenting, on life, what ideas you found most important and that you want to hold true and live into. So, to give you a little more insight, the first line of this document, and this will kind of set the foundation for a number of the things I'm going to talk about here, is this is what I say to my kids: be who you are, love deeply, never stop learning, leave this moment better. That's what I want my kids to pick up. And if I die and they've seen me embody that way of being, then I will be happy. I showed up fully, authentically as myself, right? Like I really listened to my heart and lived into that. I loved deeply, where they knew how much I loved them. And even what I was most passionate about, they saw me live out my deepest loves. And they saw that voracious learning and curiosity coming through in everything I did. And then moment after moment, they saw me trying to make this place better, from the environment to conversations to little moments. So for you, what is your sentence? If you had one sentence to write your kids, what is it? What are those things that you want to focus on and keep top of mind that you can go back to again and again? That's what you want to start thinking about. Because after all, what are the kids going to pick up on? They're going to pick up on how you act and how you show up in the world. And so you can make this a fun activity. You can sit down with your spouse or significant other, or if you're on your own in this, write it out. Think deeply on it. And the way I think about this, and I presented this question to my wife, I said, when the kids are 40, not when they're 14, not when they're 24, when they're 40, what lessons will they say they picked up and learned from us? Not because we told them, but because of how we lived, that they absorbed it by watching us. And I'm very specific about saying when they're 40, because they've gone through enough of life. It makes me think of a conversation I had with Paul Asiente. He's retired now, but he was the head squash coach at Trinity College, and he's regarded as one of the winningest college coaches in sports history. Look him up, Paul Asiente. He actually was on the podcast. He said something a few years ago to me that really just left a lasting impression. And he was talking about a conversation he was having, I'm pretty sure, with his athletic director, and talking about how the players think of Paul. And he says, I don't care how they think about me right when they leave school, or even 2 years or 3 years after. He says, ask me what they think about their time on this team and my coaching in 10 years. Because he knows they need to go into life to actually experience some of the challenges, some of the difficulties. Life has to be fired at them point blank, and they've got to deal with it. And what he's focused on, or what Paul was focused on, was teaching them the timeless lessons that they are going to carry with them, not just when they're 24 or 34, but when they're 44, 54. Real wisdom about entering adulthood and the challenges that go with it. The author Umberto Eco, he's got this great line. He says, I believe that what we become depends on what our fathers teach us at odd moments when they aren't trying to teach us. We are formed by little scraps of wisdom. That to me embodies Coach Asiente. It wasn't necessarily about the posters they had in their locker room or on the walls, or even so much what he was saying. It was what he was doing. It's how he lived. It's how he showed up day after day, that these deepest lessons were transmitted through osmosis from being around him. And so we need those types of titans, those types of pillars in our lives, because, well, let me add to that. We need to become those types of pillars for our kids, because they see everything and they're going to live out what they see. It's those little moments that they pick up on. And some of the most gut-wrenching moments that we can have as parents is when you watch your kids do something and you know what they're doing is your absolute worst traits. And in that moment, we're facing that brutal reality that they learned that from us. And that is the only place they picked up that horrible trait, was from us. And so when those moments happen, they can either break us or break us open. They need to become wake-up calls where we must change, we must evolve, we must grow, we must hold ourselves to a higher standard in order to set a foundation for our kids. And so we need to embody the behaviors and ways of being that we would be proud to see them act out. Once your children are born, you are never going to think about life or look at yourself in the same way. You are looking at yourself and how you live through their eyes, because you realize they always see and they're always watching and they're always learning from us. And that gets back to one of the quotes I started this episode with, the Carl Jung quote. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of his parents. I'm going to read that again. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents. All of a sudden, what a quote like that does is it instantaneously shifts the responsibility back on us. It puts our own internal growth back on us. What unlived burdens are we facing and are we placing on our children? You know, you can even go further. It's like, what are the fragile ego issues that I haven't worked through and now I'm burdening my child with? Now, that is a deep, deep thought. But if we really feel deeply that we have a moral obligation to do better for our children, this is the type of questions we have to explore. That's the type of inner work we have to do, because until we do, that's what we're putting on our kids, our own unlived life. And I had a lot of experience witnessing this. I spent over a decade coaching kids lacrosse and high-level high school lacrosse, and I can't tell you how many times I saw the unlived life of a parent being burdened and pushed onto a kid. You know, you've got the parents on the sideline who are just shouting at their kids or forcing them to do all of these things, because you realize that the parent hasn't faced their own failures, their own inadequacies. And so all of a sudden they're pushing and projecting all of that onto their kid. They just haven't grown enough. They haven't developed enough ego strength to let their child find their own unique expression in the world. They couldn't handle that their kid was going to be average. He wasn't going to be the superstar, and it's so sad to see. But what you realize at the root of that, and you start to see it again and again, and believe me, we're all guilty, is that we are pushing things onto our kids that we just haven't figured out or wrestled through. And it's really humbling to realize, because all of us do this in our own ways. So we need to first be aware of it, of how we're pushing this onto our lives, and decide that we can make a change. And I'm going to get into the other quote I said at the top of this by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. As you guys know, he's one of my favorites. And he said, there are only two lasting bequests we can hope to give our children. One of these is roots, the other wings. We as parents need to set a foundation. And that foundation for me, it's built on love, it's built on belonging, it's built on acceptance. There's this great line, I think it's one of the most important quotes I've ever come across, by John Bowie. He says, all of life is a series of daring explorations from a secure base. Think about that. All of life is a series of daring explorations from a secure base. If you don't have a secure base, and that secure base is internal trust within yourself, courage, confidence, you have a sense of belonging, you have a sense of community. If you don't have that base, how the hell are you going to have the courage to step out on your own in life and take risks? You're not. It's why Goethe's quote is so vital, because we need to give our kids roots, strong roots that dig deep into the ground, because the biggest trees have the deepest roots. And if we give them that, that sets the foundation so our kids can develop their wings. Now, when a child doesn't feel that secure base, they never go out and find where their stretch points are, where their edges are, what type of life, what type of person they can be. So 2 timeless gifts, roots and wings. Give them to your kids. And the way that people are actually going to develop these, how our children are going to develop these, our own complete and total presence. I say it again and again, presence to me is paramount. All positive results in life come downstream of presence. So if you're not being present, you are not enforcing the way of being that is going to provide your kids the strongest base and greatest wings. And it's too easy today to not show up with presence. You know, we bring the work home, both physically and mentally, and then we're constantly distracted on the devices. We're never looking up. We're looking down. We're not looking up into their eyes, but they feel this. I'm sure you've had your kids mention times where it's like, hey, daddy, why are you on your phone? Right? It's like, why are you there with that thing instead of here with me? It's those times you're there, but you're not really there. And man, this has some really deep and profound psychological effects on kids. And I've even seen the more time that I'm on the device when I'm with them, I get edgier. I'm not as good of a person as I know I can be. And so pick it up, put it in the other room, bring your attention, bring your presence back to the most important thing in the world, which is them. And this also makes me think of another thing I read by Peter Barton. I think the book is Not Fade Away, and it's about his early onset battle with middle-aged cancer, where he seemed to be having a great life, and then all of a sudden a shockwave of cancer. And he says this line in his book that just really, really hit me. He said, this family noise, he's talking about a very loud house. He had multiple kids. And so often we fight that family noise, right? But he was saying this family noise is the music that's beyond music. This is vitality. This is life. Now, anyone who has kids, the house gets loud, it gets chaotic, it gets hectic, it feels overwhelming. The mess, the clutter, the noise, all of that. But Peter wrote that a few months before he died, and he realized that noise, that's the music beyond music. That's vitality. That's life. And sometimes we have to go to the edge or get close to loss to realize actually the gift of what's unfolding in front of us. And I'm not sure if you've had a similar experience to me. When my kids go away and the house is empty, it's not loud, it's quiet. There's a loneliness, an eeriness to it, an emptiness. And what I'm actually craving a day before, I really didn't want anymore. I didn't want the noise. I didn't want the loudness. And all of a sudden I'm craving it again because I was missing the music beyond the music. And so sometimes we just need to zoom out, to step back, get a little bit better perspective to understand what matters and what are some of the things that we can actually find deep joy in that originally, when we're rushing through life, we don't have the presence to appreciate. And presence to appreciate makes me think about loving deeply. It was one of the things I said in that original sentence. So what do I mean by loving deeply? Well, if you can love yourself enough, let's start there. Do you love yourself, who you are, what you're doing and who you're becoming, and the people who matter to you? Do they feel that love that you have for them? And then let's expand it. What about understanding the interconnected nature of the world, of the other people in your community, to the greater community? Can you do that? Can you send ripples out onto this earth to allow others to be seen and acknowledged and felt? And I think one of the greatest embodiments of loving deeply everyone comes from a Zulu greeting. So when the Zulu people say this, the term sawubona doesn't just mean hi or hello. It means I see you. I see all of you. I see your humanity. I see your soul. I see your entire ancestral lineage, which had to come together to bring you right here in front of me in this very moment. That's how I want to see people. That's how I want to see nature, and that's how I want to see life. Sawubona, seeing the wholeness, the soul behind everything. And it also makes me think of another great African saying, Ubuntu. Ubuntu can be summarized. It's this phrase that basically encapsulates, I am because we are, meaning that a person's identity, our overall well-being, it is inextricably linked to the community and the relationships around them. Let that set in. I am because we are. So this teaches us about humanity, about the interconnected, intertwined lives of all of us around us, reminding that we grow together, right? Not just in isolation. We so often think, especially in America, that growth, that self-help is all done in isolation. But no, we need others to bring that out in us. And to add a little more color to this, there's this great story an anthropologist told about an African tribe. And so what he did is he put a basket of fruit near a tree. And so he told all the kids in the tribe that the first one to find the fruits was actually going to win this entire basket of fruits. So when he tells them to go run, they all look at each other. All the kids in the tribe, they look at each other and they join hands and they run together. Think about that. Instead of going off on their own, they look at each other, they join hands, and then they go get the fruits together. And so he asked them why they did this. And this is what they said. Ubuntu. How can one of us be happy if all the other ones are sad? So hopefully this way of being Sawubona and Ubuntu maybe changes a little bit how you approach the people the rest of your day. And it gets back to that ability to see others and let them be seen. This is one of the greatest gifts we can ever develop and ever pass on to our kids. And I can't tell you how frequently I see this lacking. I don't know if you notice when you're walking by kids today, none of them acknowledge you. None of them. Yeah, almost every time earbuds are in, they're looking at their device. But even when they're not, they won't even look up. And those kids, they are begging from the deepest part of them to be seen, to be acknowledged, to find some meaning, to find some connection. And I just have this deep terror, and it ties into some of the statistics I read at the beginning of this, that the world is rapidly progressing further and further away from this. More people not connected, heads down, hearts nowhere. Hearts are just lost, buried in those devices. And what we need to do is look people in the eye, to let them be seen and feel seen. And one of the people who I think does an incredible job embodying this, he's one of my favorite people, that's the orchestra conductor, Benjamin Zander. And this is what he said about his leading of people. He said, my job is to awaken the possibility in my players. And then he said, do you know how I know if I'm doing that or not? He says, I look in their eyes, and if their eyes are shining, I'm doing it. Think about that. The people you're leading, the kids you're raising, your significant other, when you look in their eyes, what are their eyes doing? Are they shining? Are they shining because of you? Or are they down, distracted, distant? What we want to be is we want to be the reason our children's eyes are shining when we walk in the room. How amazing of a life will you have lived is when you walk into a room, your child's eyes shine. And I'll also ask you, is that too much to ask? Is it too much to ask to be extremely present and intentional and realize that when I walk through this door, when they see me, no matter how tired, no matter how exhausted, no matter how much bullshit I've dealt with, can I make their eyes shine when I walk into this room and see them? Imagine what a life built on that looks like. Making their eyes shine doesn't mean we don't have hard conversations with them. It doesn't mean that we don't tell them the truth. But I believe that if we continually set that foundation, give them the roots based on their eyes shining, that when they are really in the thick of life, when their eyes are clouded over with gray, they're facing the hardships, who are they going to come to for support? You. Who are they going to come to for guidance? You. That's what we want to focus on. Making their eyes shine sets a foundation. That to me is what loving deeply is all about, and that is what I'm hoping they pull out of me. And this is all built on connection, right? And one of those stories that just kind of sit with you and you don't even know why around connection was from David Whyte. As you know, he's one of my favorite poets. You should check out his books. He's still alive. He's not one of the 200-year-old poets I talk about a lot. But this is what he was saying. He said he was having a disagreement with his teenage daughter. And this is what he said, and I love this line. He says, I was just about to say the last deeply satisfying, unhelpful thing. That last deeply satisfying, unhelpful thing. He says, but I caught myself. And he said, and this is internal talk, he said, David, this isn't a real conversation. How do you make this a real conversation? So what he did is he went and he made both of them a cup of tea, and then he set out a tray of cookies. And he walked up to her door, and he knocked on her door, and he said, Charlotte, who's his daughter, he said, tell me one thing you'd like me to stop doing as a father, and tell me one thing you'd like me to do more of. And he says an invitation was made. That right there, that's connection. That is a more evolved form of parenting that I want to embody. I hear a story like that, and the next time that, you know, my kid makes me lose my mind and I want to scream or you want to shout or you want to slam the door. Think about that story. Are you going to say that last deeply satisfying but unhelpful thing, one that doesn't help either of you? Or are you going to slow down? Are you going to think about engaging and connecting in a deeper way and making them a cup of tea? And the more we do that, elements of that, the more times we build connection, and once again, this is all rooted in presence, I believe the next thing this allows them to do, and we get to see more clearly, is just allowing them to develop agency in life, of giving them the gift of taking the wheel. We want our kids driving their own cars. They need to lead and have full responsibility for their life. So when they develop agency and responsibility and trust in themselves, they can navigate the unknown and the complexities of life when we're not there, which is an inevitability. They will be out on their own someday. So are we setting them up? Are we building the foundation for that to take place? Or are we just stepping in, correcting their errors, giving them the easy answers because we don't want them to be frustrated or upset? We just want them to experience joy. Or are we allowing them to get to the joy on the other side of this? Joy that can be earned. The William James line, the strenuous life tastes better. You only get to taste that if you've taken the wheel, if you've developed agency. Or are we that helicopter parent who's so afraid of a little bump or bruise or a broken bone, but we forget that broken bones are going to heal a lot faster than walking through the rest of your life with fear. So we need to continually empower them to step off the cliff, to develop their wings on the way down, to do things, to mess up, right? To go out in the unknown, to have to handle that, the ambiguity, the complexity, and figure out what they are capable of. And once again, if we've built the foundation of love and belonging, they have more courage to do this. And regarding courage, one of the most courageous things we can do in life is trusting that we are walking our own authentic path. Are we living a life that's true to us? Because if we are, they're going to see that. There's this radiance that the people who are staying true to themselves embody and project. And so when we do that, we begin to, through osmosis, give our kids that gift to express who they uniquely are in the world. Their own individualness, their own shining brightness, where they are an N of one. To know that they can live and be on an authentic path. And on that authentic path, they're going to be lost. There's going to be times they're wandering alone in the wilderness, times that don't make sense. But if you stay true to that, if you keep carving that path, they're simply deeply enriching and satisfying and meaningful. I mentioned David Whyte a minute ago. I'll read you a line from one of his poems that the first time I read, it just struck me at my core. You know, one of those lines that kind of send a shockwave through you. And this is what he wrote. He said, "To be human is to become visible while carrying what is hidden as a gift to others. To be human is to become visible while carrying what is hidden as a gift to others." Trust in your authentic path and in theirs and empower them to walk it. Because I believe if you truly listen to your heart and what your soul wants to express, that not only is where your greatest joy is, but also the world smiles back. Think about that. The times that you've been most sad, depressed, frustrated, it's when you're not living a life that's true to you, a life that you love. And I'm going to read a longer passage right now that I think embodies the essence of this, and it's by Dr. James Hollis, one of my favorite authors. It's a little bit long, but stay with me. I think there's so much richness in this. He says, "I truly believe that the history of the world would change if we could just imagine parents healthy enough, wise enough, mature enough, evolved enough to say to their growing children something like the following: who you are is terrific. You are here to become yourself as fully as you can. Always weigh the costs and consequences of your choices as they affect others. But you are here to live your journey, not someone else's and certainly not mine. I am living my journey so you won't have to worry about me. You have within you a powerful source. Call it your instinct, your intuition, your gut wisdom, which will always tell you what is right for you. Serve that. Respect that. Be generous to yourself and others, but always live what is right for you. Life is really rather simple. If you do what is right for you, it is right for you and others. If you do what is wrong for you, it will be wrong for you and others. Know that we may not always agree on things, and that is fine, because we are different people. We're not clones. Always know that I will respect you and value you no matter your choices, and you will always find here people who love you and care for you. If we are ever going to set our children free as we wish to be freed from the web our parents have spun for us, we have to generate our own lives. And if we really do love our children as we profess, then we have to free them of our expectations that they live like us. Dr. Howells says, where I am stuck, my children will be stuck, or will be diverting a significant amount of energy to compensate to get unstuck. Where I am bound by fear, by lack of permission, they will be bound. Where I am looking to others to help me evade growing up, either they will replicate my immaturity or become unduly burdened by responsibilities. Whew. You might want to go back and re-listen to that again and again. I know I've thought about that deeply a number of times. So we need to live our path so our kids can live their path. It's really interesting with regards to people following their own path. So one of the first questions I get when I'm talking about kids with people I've known that knew I played lacrosse, had an All-American career and played professionally, the first thing they ask me usually is like, oh, so are your kids all in on lacrosse like you? And instantaneously, I'm just thinking, I frankly could care less. I could care less if they ever pick up a stick, if they ever play. What I want for them is I want them to find their own thing. The greatest gift I got in childhood was finding the sport of lacrosse, which I loved so deeply, and I committed myself fully to it. The only reason I got the accolades I did and got to the level I got to was because I fell deeply in love with that. So I want my kids to discover that for themselves, whether it's drawing, whether it's science, whether it's dance, whether it's biology, whether it's lacrosse, it doesn't matter. But I want them to find the essence of that, to find something they are so passionate and joyful and all in on, that the deepest lessons they can learn in the doing. And so that's what I'm helping and hoping, that I am tending to their own inner fires to allow that to come through. And I also have to give them enough experimentation that they can try things and discover this on their own. That to me is critical. and just so if someone does call me out and they see me at a lacrosse field on Sunday, a week ago, my two sons did start playing lacrosse. So if you do see me out there, they were not forced into it. They wanted to. And I'll close this element of the podcast with a great quote from Joseph Campbell, where he says, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. The goal of life is to make your heartbeat match the beat of the universe, to match your nature with nature. This is around unfolding your own unique, authentic path. And I want my kids to unfold in their own way. This concept of unfolding is very important to me. I don't want to rush what can't be rushed. And so often, believe me, I do this a ton. We want to rush what can't be rushed. We want our kids to be further along than they are, instead of stopping and appreciating where they're at and doing the things to enrich their soil as much as possible where they currently are. You know, a tree is not going to grow faster if you're yanking on its branches, and neither do the children. But we continually try to do that with them. The way trees grow faster, just like kids, is we take their soil and their roots and we tend to it. We water it, we hydrate it, we give it sunshine and space so it can grow. It can grow. In the symposium, Plato said such a beautiful line. He said, "This is one of the highest human privileges there is, to be midwife to the birth of the soul in another." I'm going to say that again. One of the highest human privileges there is to be midwife to the birth of the soul in another. That's what we're doing as parents. Never forget this. And then also never forget what Maya Angelou said. She said, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. And that's when people aren't carving their path, their own authentic path. They aren't living the life that's true to them. So let's be the type of parents that allow our kids to do that, to do the full expression of their uniqueness and share their greatest gifts and greatest joys with the world. And when they find that, when we give them the opportunity, all of a sudden they become obsessed. And there is this deep love of learning. And that to me is one of the keys. There's a great line by John William Lubbock. He said, if we succeed in giving the love of learning, the learning itself is sure to follow. And one of the best ways to do that is to let them find their thing. And when they're finding their thing, another thing we need to keep in the back of our mind is helping allow them to figure out ways to leave it better. And if we can show them, and for me, this is a first principle, if I can show them in every moment, no matter how big or how little, what I'm trying to do is make that moment better. There are profound lessons for your children when you're doing that, because the highest life you can live is where every single moment that comes before you is better off because it did. So the questions that should be going through your mind are, how can I serve the present moment, right? How can I serve this person in front of me? How can I serve my community? Once again, how can I serve this moment? And we always know what we can do to serve this moment. As I'm saying this and thinking about serving, one of the timeless lines by Dr. Martin Luther King, life's most persistent and urgent question is this: what are you doing for others? What are you doing for others? What are you doing for others? And so there's this deep responsibility to hold ourselves to a higher standard so we can serve our children, our community, ourselves even better. And that to me, that is really enriching. And that is really what it means to live fully and graciously and intentionally and leave the future better. And one of the key elements that I also think is critical, and this ties into a lot of the dissatisfaction, the unhappiness, the depression kids are living in now, is we have to teach them how to live into the discomfort and the pain and the challenges and the unknown that take place in life. If we never give them an understanding of how to navigate failures and setbacks and pain and loss and those freaking challenging emotions like you experience with a heartbreak. I remember my first heartbreak. It was so world-crushing because I'd never had one before. But I also never really had someone who pulled me aside and really helped me see that you will experience this again, right? There are patterns to life. And as parents, so we want to teach them that they can face this. They can face all of it, the pain, the setbacks, the heartaches, all of it. The wheel turns, right? And so many times, actually, great novels or literature, we get to read other people's pain and other people's stories. And it gives us a different perspective and a better understanding and an understanding that wheel does turn, about the patterns. Life goes on. And you don't want to run from these things. You don't want to hide. Like I said in my episode on suffering, the pain, these heartaches, they're going to be your greatest teachers. But you'll never learn the lessons or extract the wisdom if you constantly run from the discomfort. And I've seen again and again, more and more people are doing that. You know, if every time you're bored or disturbed emotionally, or there's even just a second of free time, you grab your phone or the bottle or whatever the crutch coping mechanism is, how are you going to pull out those timeless lessons? You need to learn to handle the mystery and the unknown and the ambiguity of life. It's not something to run from, but something to live in. Instead of trying to construct your life to avoid discomfort, which, let me remind you, is going to be a losing battle, what we are working towards as parents is to construct our inner ability to handle these types of discomfort. And by us being able to handle them, our kids see it's a possibility. But if every time something frustrating is going on, We distract ourselves, we numb ourselves. How are they going to learn those lessons? It's the type of person who has never developed that inner capacity. They've never developed a pain threshold or a problem threshold, right? Where the tiniest thing disturbs them. It could be on a scale of 1 to 10, a 1 or 2 problem, and they're thrown off. Their day's gone. They can't even recover. But then someone who's spent time in this and hasn't run from it, well, then they can handle a level 8 problem, a level 9 problem, maybe even a level 10. And so eventually their threshold becomes so high that almost nothing really disturbs their peace of mind. And so if you wait for everything to be resolved, you'll stay exactly where you are. So instead, allow your kids to find the lessons in these, to learn how to face some of this stuff with a bit of curiosity, to learn what it wants to teach us. That, my children, is something I hope you pick up from me. There's 2 final ones I'm going to leave you with. The first, and I did an episode on this, is simplifying your life down to the handful of things that truly matter. It seems like we pile on more and more, and we actually end up living and experiencing less and less. What I want to do, what I'm trying to do, is simplify my life down to the handful of things that actually matter, and then I am pouring all of my energy, my focus, and attention on those things. My deepest relationships, my passion, my growth, my work. But too often, we complicate our lives and we miss the real joy, the real importance of these handful of things that actually matter. So be more intentional, be clear, be courageous enough to actually live by an internal code that prioritizes what you love deepest. And the final one's going to be imagination. Imagination, imagination. One of the greatest lines, I think, is by one of the smartest people of all time, Albert Einstein. Listen to this. He said, if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. It doesn't say pick up another science book. It says read them fairy tales. Teach them to develop imagination, to think outside the box, to dream. Don't limit your mind to what's known. Expand your mind to what seems impossible. That, to me, is one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids, because when they're feeling out and down and depressed, depression so often is a lack of imagination. You can't construct a greater reality than the one you're in. You can't construct a greater future. But if again and again we allow our kids to stoke and develop that curiosity, that imagination, all of a sudden, the future always becomes this beautiful possibility that they can create and live into. And so the final test of wisdom is this. How does one live? How are we living today as parents to build the foundation to give our kids the roots so that they can develop the wings and fly? And only you can answer that. But I hope this episode has now fostered a little bit more excitement, a little bit more curiosity, a little bit more intentionality in terms of what you want to do and how you want to live, and the lessons that through doing you are teaching your kids. So I'll leave you with this. Be who you are, love deeply, never stop learning, leave this moment better. I'll see you on the next episode. This episode resonated with you. If it stirred something, opened something up, or even challenged something, I'd love to hear about it. You can connect with me directly at whatgotyouthere.com. That's where you'll find my writing, my books, more about my executive coaching work I do with the people who want to live and lead from a deeper place. And if this episode made you think of someone, a friend, a teammate, a partner, someone who's been in the grind and might need to hear this, send it to them. Because sometimes all it takes is a single conversation to shift the direction we're heading in. Again, it's whatgotyouthere.com. You can reach out, learn more, or just say hi. I always love hearing from people walking this path. Thanks for listening, and until next time.